Good evening and welcome to Art World Innovators, exploring stories of innovation in the art world. I'm your host, Susan Cohn, and you're listening to UMFM 101.5 at the University of Manitoba. Our guest this evening is Kevin O'Dwyer, internationally recognized metalsmith, sculptor, and photographer. Kevin is based in Ireland and has worked in the contemporary art and cultural heritage field for over 25 years in various countries. He studied biochemistry at the Waterford Institute of Technology in Ireland and holds an MA in Cultural Policy and Arts Management from University College, Dublin. Kevin established and directed Ireland's National Sculpture Park, Sculpture in the Parklands, and was the recipient of 4 national awards for this. In 2013 and 14, he co-initiated and directed the Sculpture in the Wild International Sculpture Symposium. He's been artistic director, project manager, curator for such sculpture parks as Ireland's National Sculpture Park, Sculpture in the Parklands, Blackfoot Pathways, Sculpture in the Wild in the US. Kevin has worked on curatorial and art management projects for Brown University in the US, European Union Educational and Culture Foundation, and in Ireland for the University College Dublin, National College of Art and Design, the Heritage Council, Cafe Music Nights, and the World Academy of Irish Music and Dance. He's also sat on the boards of Cultural Relations Committee of Ireland, Visual Arts Ireland, Crafts Council of Ireland, and the Sculpture Society of Ireland. He's been the recipient of the Lewis and Clark Historic Preservation Award in 2019 and the Montana Governor's Art Award in 2020. He's been a guest speaker for numerous art events, national and international universities, symposiums, seminars, and biennales. His artworks may be found in the national, international, private, and public collections, such as Victoria and Albert Museum in London, the National Museum of Ireland, Norwegian Broadcasting Corporation, and the Swiss Embassy in Paris. He's been involved in artist residencies, such as the 2008 World Congress of Archaeology, and represented Ireland at the 2022 Helsinki Week's Design Diplomacy Program. He has published widely, most recently the work entitled St. Mankin's Shrine, Art and Devotion in 12th Century Ireland, a collaboration with archaeologist Griffin Murray, looking at 12th century reliquy, one of Ireland's most important artifacts. Welcome to Art World Innovators, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Well, thank you, Susan. Thank you very much for inviting me.
What would you say are some of your earliest memories of being drawn to photography, the arts, and archaeology?
Well, my parents were immigrants that moved to the United States, and I was born in the United States, and then we moved back to Ireland. And I think that change, that was in the 60s. And we ended up in Cashel, which has a wonderful medieval cathedral in ruins. But I think that juxtaposition at that time of going from the new world to the old world really enhanced my visual work. I picked up a camera at a very early age and started photographing. I was very interested in artifacts and in monastic sites, etc. So the basis of my earlier work would definitely be, and my influences and my interest in metalsmithing, etc., would have been from that change of environment and the history behind it. So a lot of my early work, again, through the photography and then through the metalsmithing side of my work, which were the more small works, would have come from that interest in the 9th, 12th century metalworking in Ireland, but putting it in a contemporary way, maybe using some of the actual forms or some of the ideas, some of the flowing forms, but in a very contemporary way.
You had some apprenticeship studies with such master artists as Harriet Dressiger, Bill Frederick, and Hiki Seppa. Were these instrumental to your artistic development?
Very much so. When I finished secondary school, I could either go towards my strong interests were history and archaeology or the sciences. And I decided I wanted to travel, and archaeologists weren't doing much traveling in the early 70s. So I took on science and was a biochemist, biotechnologist. And I ended up in Chicago, but I still had a strong interest in the monastic and the metalsmithing, etc. And I started off just by taking night classes. And then from those night classes, it became a passion, and I packed in the day job. And I apprenticed with Harriet Reisinger, Bill Frederick, and then the Finnish metalsmith, Heikki Seppa. So they were all very strong influences in the development of my work and great encouragement as well for what I was doing.
Can you give us some examples of the works that you've designed, exploring the techniques that you may have learned from these masters?
Well, the hollow ware making, the actual making, taken from flat sheet metal in sterling silver or in bronze, and then creating the pieces. Quite a few of the pieces are in collections now. Probably my best known ones are that combination, the teapot series of the small works would have been the teapot series, which combine the kind of my influences of the architectural, the Art Deco, and then the flowing forms of Irish work from the early years, the insular work, and also the Art Nouveau. So they're very playful, they're a lot of fun, and they're very engaging and interactive. And I'm very interested in whatever areas that I'm in. I'm interested in the way that the viewer engages with my work, everything from the small works right up to the monumental works, that they have that ability to engage with it. And then, as Marcel once said, the viewer completes the work. And that's very much what happens in quite a few of the pieces, is that they enjoy and they engage with the actual artwork itself.
Your artworks and projects reflect that ancient landscape and industrial archaeology and architecture. Can you explain this a little more and describe a few installations that illustrate this interest, perhaps at Sculptures in the Parklands that you founded?
So in the year 2000, I was on the board committee of the Arts Council in County Offaly and also the Heritage Council. And that area is very much involved in harvesting peat for industrial production. And the industrial production was the actual generation of electricity. And we had power plants, and the peat was actually used for that work. But after the actual harvesting of the materials, there are dead sites or brownfield sites that are left. And I propose that we would actually invite artists, have a symposium, invite artists to engage with that landscape. So my piece at that time, called 60 Degrees, is again playing with this idea of an architectural type piece in the landscape, a cut in the landscape that draws people into the landscape. So it's a series of triangular forms, and the forms are actually, the pieces are actually recycled from the industrial landscape. So when I was working on this piece, they were pulling up a light rail system that would go into the bogland areas and take the peat into the actual power stations. And when they were pulling it up, I used the rail and I used the oak sleepers and rebuilt these triangular forms. The front and the back one is very much about the industrial use of that landscape. And then I created a stainless steel one, which is about the new use of that landscape, that now was going to be open to the community so that the community can engage with the piece. A lot of my larger works are actually about recycling or repurposing. What, as a symposium artist, I come on site. I'm very interested in the history of the area, the heritage. If it's an industrial site, then looking at what is left, the artifacts, the remains that are left, and then using those pieces within my own artwork. A classic example, I guess, would be in Sculpture in the Wild, where I took the teepee burner, which was used for burning the refuse from timber, from the cutting of timber, and reconstructing that on site and creating this storytelling piece that has also been used for concerts, etc. It was a huge, it gives the listener some idea. The piece is about 75 foot in height and in a taper, and it's 40 foot in diameter at the base. It's a cylindrical type form, and it has wonderful acoustics. So it was just wonderful for, actually, we have concerts there, we use it for that. But some of the other parts of that was the storytelling part. When I came into the community, I talked with a number of the elders, and they were talking about when they were young, they remembered the Delaney sawmills and how they would go by it at nighttime and it glowed because the teepee burner, which was burning all the refuse from the sawmill, was glowing at nighttime. So then I decided to install photovoltaic cells that went into a battery system and then installed LED lighting. So at nighttime, the top of the actual piece glows as in their Montana memory. So this was an important part. In the inside then, using archival photographic material, large panels that I printed on steel that are 4 foot by 6 foot. I took archival imagery and I showed the archival imagery of the actual lumber area, the people that harvested the material as much as I could from exactly from that area imagery. So when you walk into the teepee burner, it's very much about that storytelling. And very important that engagement with the community. And the two sculpture parks that I've actually established were in rural communities, and they have a story to tell. And so you're engaging with the community, you're talking to them. The other artists, the other symposium artists, not just myself, are all storytellers as well. They come in, they see, they work on site for 3 to 4 weeks. They work with the community and they create their works. The beauty of having working on site like this is that the community get to know the artists. They understand the story. A lot of our work is quite abstract, but by using their materials, they are getting the ideas of where we're coming from and what we're doing, and it is very much a collaboration. It's bringing ourselves as the creative force and the ideas, and then collaborating with the actual community in building the pieces. And the beauty of building those pieces with the community is they have ownership of it as well. So it's very much part of their community and their storytelling.
What were some of the projects you were involved in with the World Academy of Irish Music and Dance at the Limerick University in Ireland, and what did you find most valuable about these experiences?
So the World Academy of Irish Music and Dance is in the University of Limerick, and it is just a wonderful facility for internationally for both Irish and international students to come and learn traditional Irish music, but also it moves into the step dancing as well as contemporary dance, etc. So I was working with the director, Micheál Sullivan, who I've known for quite a few years, a wonderful composer. Sadly, he's passed away in the last 2 years. But we worked on this and it was a new build. So it was a new building within the university. And he asked me to curate, to do yet again that idea of the storytelling of the 20 years of the actual establishment of this program. And so I worked with Morris Gunning, a photographer, and we used some archival from his work, and we also documented, and we did these large scale panels of dance and music and musicians that are throughout the actual building. And it was all about that storytelling of the tradition within the musicians as well as the dance. And then for the actual launch of the building and the program there, I worked with Paul Brady and the Chieftains and various other other musicians to actually launch the day. And it has remained up to all the imagery. There were over 40 large scale images. Some of them were 12 foot by 18 foot of dancers, etc., within the actual building itself. It gives a real sense of what that artistic community is about and what that school is about and what it has delivered over the years. I've had that opportunity to do that on a number of projects, curation projects over the years. It's been really valuable. Another one was peatlands, in which I worked with a curated artists from around Ireland that actually were inspired by this rich bogland area where I live. I live right in the Bog of Allen, which is 50,000 acres of peatland and wetland. So there are all types of visual artists doing both installation work, painting, craft, etc. So that was a very big project because I curated and directed the International Peatlands Conference, all the visual arts and the music during that year when I was director of sculpture in the Parklands. It brought in the other elements. There was all the scientific side, of which I was very interested in, obviously, with my science background, but it also brought the artistic side and see how those two parts collaborate very often in their work. The curation side of my work is very much, again, about bringing people together that have a story to tell more than just selecting work. I think going back to the sculpture parks, and I think this is an important part with the sculpture parks, that's the two that I've been involved in and consulted on one or two other things. But they are artists coming on site and making the work on site. They're engaging with that community, they're working on the site, they're involved with it, as opposed to many sculpture parks that are basically work that is brought in and put down and landscaped around. They're wonderful. They're part of the education system, and we get a chance to see wonderful works of art from other parts of the country. But they really don't engage with the community to the same extent. So the engagement with the community is more the education side, within that. But the symposium artists are artists that come on site and they are the storytellers with that. And Jack B. Yeats said, "No one creates, the artist assembles memories." And I think that's really what a symposium artist does. They take the memories that that community have, but they also create new memories. They create the memories that the community working with those artists that they will carry on and they will move that as part of the storytelling for that actual area. The other really interesting thing about the development of the rural sculpture parks and the way they're developed is that the cultural opportunities also bring commerce into that area. So sculpture in the parklands now has up to 100,000 people visiting it every year. The knock-on effect of that is that people come, they have a meal, they may have some drinks, they may do things there, and they revitalize an area, a landscape, a community that basically the peat production is no longer there. So it helps create some possible jobs, but also some commerce. The same thing with sculpture in the wild. It was an opportunity for a small town, population 950 to 1,000 people, whose main production was a couple of sawmills that are no longer there. And by bringing in this into their area, we were donated 26 acres of land to work on. And from that, we were getting up to, I think last year was 45,000 people into there. And that has made a huge difference within that community. You have the bars, the pubs, even the petrol station or whatever. People are coming visiting. If they take a drive for a couple of hours, they're going to stay and have lunch. They're going to do some other activities in that town. And I think that's a really important part of what we're doing as well. We're creating commerce, but through cultural events. The summer music program is on usually between 6 and 8 weeks. Every Saturday, there is a concert in the teepee burner that brings in people as well. Everything is for free, by the way. So going into the sculpture parks is free. Going into the concerts, our education programs as well. We work with primary schools, elementary schools within the areas. So we would have maybe up to 10 schools coming while the artists are there. The children are there for a full day. They come in, they have a talk about the environmental issues as well as the artistic. They have a tour, they get to meet the artists, they have their lunch there, and then often they have time to actually make a small piece themselves using found objects from the area. So they're all really important for the storytelling. It's really interesting. The last piece that I made for the 10th anniversary, which celebrates the 10th anniversary, we were doing some of it was the steel fabrication was off site for this because it's a very large piece. And the welder that I was working with had actually gone through the school program 10 years before. So that was just absolutely wonderful to see that he remembered it and he remembered being on site. And now he was actually creating one of the pieces that was going on site at this stage. There are just some thoughts about that. What can happen within a community by bringing in something that is, to say the least about it, very foreign to a rural community in Montana. But there were enough community members who were very excited about the idea. They were looking for something, and it's just wonderful fishing there, and it's a beautiful landscape. But this was an added piece that also engaged the actual community themselves.
You were involved in some artist residencies, such as the 2008 World Congress of Archaeology, and represented Ireland at the 2022 Helsinki Design Diplomacy Program. Can you talk a little about the artworks you did for these events and how the experiences may have also enriched your art practice?
So I guess because of my strong interest in archaeology and history and heritage, in 2006, I was the artistic director of a book called Stories in a Sacred Landscape. That was a look at the monastic sites in the county that I live. And through that, I have a strong connection with archaeologists and with the landscape within this area. And I was invited to be the artist in residence at the World Congress, which was held at the University College Dublin. So with that, I created a large piece. Again, is playing off the Neolithic standing stones, but in stainless steel, and the play with the chevron form. So again, my pieces can be very simple forms that are cuts in the landscape, line drawings. I spoke at the conference. I talked about that connection between the arts and the archaeology and a lot of the interaction between the two areas and the two studies, but also went then and had the opportunity to make this large scale piece that is on the landscape there that celebrated the conference in Ireland. Another book that I'd finished just recently with Griffin Murray is St. Mansion's Shrine, and that is a piece on our 12th century reliquary. Now, a reliquary is a box, you could say, that holds the bones of a saint, and that is St. Mansion. And it was used for processional format. It contained, and it was very sacred. It's our finest reliquary that's still remaining. There was a lot of plunder, etc., between nations between the 8th and the 12th century. But that was a wonderful collaboration with Griffin Murray. And it is what I always say, it is our finest reliquary, but it also tells the story of 300 years of Irish metalsmithing on one box. Because we're looking at the insular Irish, we're looking at that early 8th, 9th century influences, which are very insular. It's very much developed without any influences from overseas. And then we have the Viking or Norwegian invasion and that interaction between the ideas of the Norwegian artists and the Irish artists in a combination that you have on the box. And then the Romanesque period rolls in during this period of time, which is more the figurative. So on the reliquary itself, you have a combination of all these styles, and it's just wonderful storytelling of this being within a community, never going to the National Museum, but being kept within the community of Lee Monaghan and Boher for the 1,000 years. It's been minded by families there. And so it stays within the church in Boher, which is part of this whole bogland area there. And it is there. It's well protected, obviously, and the National Museum have some input into it. But it was a great opportunity to take that out and to document it, and then to do the study and to write about the metalsmithing of the 12th century. Projects like that are, for me, I'm very interested in looking at communities, looking at the way they engage as well. With this particular piece, with the storytelling over quite a continual period of time, as well as how they have minded it through families and have kept it preserved within their community.
Do you have any exciting projects or art series in progress or coming up that you'd like to share with our audience?
I am working with that community in Lee Monaghan. We're looking at the Pilgrim's Path at this stage. This is a path that when they were harvesting the peat, they found it carbon dates. The earliest part of it carbon dates to roughly 2,000 years ago. And it was a walkway along the bogland area into one of the mellow cells, one of the buildings. And then it goes all the way up to 1,000 years ago, in which stone was put on top of the actual wood as the walkway there. So we're doing a lot of writing at the moment and looking at that piece. The other thing is I stepped down from directing the sculpture park in Montana. And so I'm working mostly on my own work at this stage, which has been a lot of fun. I have a couple of private commissions and doing both smaller maquette work as well as some large scale installation work in the next year. That's been a lot of my time being spent doing that. I also have 3+ acres of gardens here that I work on, and I'm installing work actually in the gardens as well. It's along the Silver River, and it's just a wonderful space. If it ever stops raining here, I can get out and do a little bit more with it. That's the work that I've been doing as of late.
Well, I'd like to thank you so much for taking the time to share your story and valuable insight with our audience. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and we wish you continued success.
Well, thank you very much, Susan.
I'm your host, Susan Cohn, and we thank you for listening to Art World Innovators here on UMFM 101.5 at the University of Manitoba. Join us again next Wednesday from 5:30 to 6 p.m. for more on today's innovators in the art world.